The true measure of success is how open your heart has been this year, how open you have been to receiving, how willing you have been to give and help others. These are the things that really freaking matter. When you really, really think about it, what really matters? Your inner critic isn't telling you about that stuff. You have to tell you about that stuff. You have to be your own best friend and your own biggest advocate and be the cheerleader that is louder and more persistent than your inner critic. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo, and am I excited to talk to you today? So excited about this topic, actually, that this is round 2. I recorded a whole episode for you, but I felt like it wasn't honed in enough. And I want you to get the most out of this topic. Today's topic is about our inner critics that tell us we are not successful. It's part of my Inner Critic series on this podcast. And if you haven't heard any other ones before, please take a look. There's a whole laundry list of them. I even have an Inner Critic 101 very early on in this podcast life history. So check that out. But I digress. This is the time of year where we are often in review and in reflection of what this year was like, what we accomplished, what we didn't, what we're hoping for next year will be different. And this can bring about one of the harshest inner critics that I have personally known, and that is the success inner critic. Today is episode 80, and I'm going to talk to you about our inner critic that tells us we are not successful. Now, for you, that may sound like a bunch of different things. It may sound like you are not a failure. There might be other messages in this vein of you didn't do enough, you didn't win, you didn't get it all done, that whole arena. But before I dive deeper into this, if you're new to the podcast, let me just say welcome. I am so glad you're here. I do work at the intersection of personal growth and professional breakthroughs. What does that mean? That means I help you with the human skills necessary to lead yourself and others. I do this work through keynote talks, through masterclasses with teams and at retreats, and through one-on-one coaching. I help you with the human skills of deeply understanding yourself, of reflecting upon your patterns, and making new choices for your thought patterns and your behaviors so that you can up-level your life, your leadership, and your results. If you want to learn more about the work I do, visit CoachTosca.com. That's CoachTosca.com. All right, let's get back into it here. Now, the success inner critic says things like this. You didn't make enough money this year. Your business results are terrible. You should have gotten a promotion and you didn't. Your raise was abysmal. You should have done better. It may even say things like, you didn't accomplish anything on your list. You didn't accomplish anything you set out to do this year. It may also have these undertones or say outright, everyone else seems to have done better than you this year. Now, sometimes this inner critic doesn't come with all of these thoughts per se, but maybe you're feeling really down and out and depressed. And there could be a number of reasons for that. But when you sit with yourself to understand why am I maybe feeling down, you may realize it's because you feel like you didn't accomplish enough this year. And what I want you to take away from this episode are some real tools and tactics for how you can get out of this downward spiral of feeling like this year was a waste or this year you were a total failure or whatever. Because listen, this time of year, I wrangle with this inner critic every friggin' year. And it's most especially hit me as an entrepreneur, right? But in your work environment, we also have review time this time of year. You may be getting a lot of external feedback that's maybe difficult to digest, and your inner critic is running amok with it and making it so much worse than maybe it was. I mean, I've had clients in the past where they've had glowing reviews amazing promotions or even raises. And they get on a call with me and they are just harping on the two things that were critical feedback. And they are just beating themselves up over it. So let's make sure that you don't do that in these last couple weeks of the year and you don't spend time with this inner critic running the show and making you feel bad about yourself and this year. One of the first things I want you to do is consider what your inner critic is telling you by asking yourself these few questions. The first question is, are the measures of success your inner critic is telling you based on societal expectations? That's number one. Are they expectations that are external, that are conditioned, that are societal, that maybe family or friends or colleagues have given to you? Or are they actually your own measures of success? That's the first question to delineate. The second thing is, does your inner critic sound like other people in your life, or does it sound like people from your past? Because these are great indicators that your inner critic is running the show and it's not that soul self, that true self, that spirit self, however you define it, your whole beautiful self that sees the bigger picture of life. And when you can start to say, oh man, that's what my dad used to say, or oh wow, my brother used to say that all the time, or whatever it is, or like my first boss, you know. But once we can start to be like, oh gosh, I've heard this song play before, then it's easier to recognize this isn't me, this is somebody else that's running the show. And then the third question I want to ask you about what your inner critic is telling you is there comparison going on? At the end of the day, is your inner critic comparing you to other people? Because that is a big fat fucking no. We're not doing that. We're not comparing ourselves. There's absolutely no good that comes from that. I don't care who you are. I don't care what business you're in. I don't care what profession you're in. We are not comparing our success metrics, our performance, how we feel about this year and what we were able to gain and accomplish based on what we see other people doing. We're not going to do that. Let's remember that inner critics tell you lies. Let's remember that this work of mastering and shifting our inner critic dialogue is to check for the actual truth, because your inner critic is feeding you lies and we're not going to have it. We're not going to end our year in despair because our inner critic is running amok. So here are some ideas for how you check for the truth with these things. And the first question to ask yourself is, how do you, not your inner critic, how do you, your beautiful whole self that knows how to look at the 50,000 foot view of your life, how do you measure success? That's the first question to check for the truth. The second question to check for the truth is, what unexpected things happened this year that may have impacted your goals? For example, the macro economy, personal things that happened, health things that happened, other priorities, caregiving needs, you name it. What unexpected things happened this year that may have had you prioritize differently than you thought you were going to have to prioritize at the beginning of the year or 6 months in, or whenever you're kind of looking at this time frame of evaluating your success? All of these things that I'm talking to you about is about coming to the rational logic, because the success inner critic will make you super emotional and it will make you believe everything it says. I mean, my inner critic was telling me this year, that maybe it's just better if I go get a job and stop trying to do this damn entrepreneurial thing. I mean, yeah, it can get real rough. And that's why we have to come back to logic. We have to come back to the truth. We have to come back to asking ourselves, how do we want to measure success? And this logical kind of exploration and interrogation, if you will, is about stepping back and looking at your life from a 50,000 foot view, because the inner critic will have you completely stuck in the weeds. And it's likely got you stuck in like one or two metrics. When my success inner critic comes to play, He likes to focus on, and I say he because it feels more masculine, but he likes to tell me about the lack of impressions of my social media, the lack of likes. He likes to tell me about how everybody else has way more views and way more followers, all these vanity metrics to tell me that I should have done better and I could have done better. It's a bunch of crap. So I have to step back 50,000 feet and look at my life. And I have to look at what measures of success am I really using? And that is the question for you. Now, listen, your answer might be, I don't know. And that's completely normal. And side note, it's a huge opportunity for when you approach 2026 and move into the new year to really think about measures of success, not just long term, not just short term, but day to day. Because then this is so much easier for you to keep your inner critic at bay because you are very clear about what success looks like for you. And so we can actually investigate this question about how you're defining success by reverse engineering it. We can look at it by what actually got prioritized. So I'll give myself as an example. This year, my word of the year was fun. That was one of my main words. I had a couple, but fun was a big one. So, truth be told, I really wanted to focus on enjoying myself this year and giving myself permission to have fun versus focus on where my business wasn't at and what my business wasn't doing in my life. Because I had beat myself up for years and years in being an entrepreneur and never hitting the mark and never reaching the goals that I wanted to reach, right? So I wanted to focus on enjoying myself, even if I wasn't where I wanted to be. So, yeah, I took several trips, several international trips. Did it impact my business? Probably not. But the truth is, I wouldn't have made a different choice anyway, because my measure of success was taking life's opportunity as they come and not delaying fun, not holding my calendar for the hopes of having some, big gig, some big opportunity. No, I made plans in advance because I was like, look, I want to prioritize fun. And like, if there's an opportunity that comes at that time, so be it. That was very different for me this year. As you think about your measures of success, you can ask yourself, what types of things did you prioritize? And you may need to really sit with that for a minute because you're prioritizing and reprioritizing your life every single day. It's constant. And with all the things going on in the world, sometimes the prioritization was just maintaining our sanity, and not falling into a deep hole of despair. And that is valid as a priority. I want you to consider the how measures of your life, how you show up, how you move in the world, who you are being, because this is likely something that your inner critic isn't bringing to the table. In other words, what were your intents for how you showed up this year, how you chose to lead, not just yourself, but others, how you chose to influence, how you chose to engage? Were you focused on being more patient and kind with others? Were you mindful not to step on others, bring people down, and dehumanize others for the sake of your own gain? Some of these things may be very unconscious. Let's bring it to the conscious. Measuring who you are being is a factor not just for success now, but for the long game of life. There might be other people out there playing the short game, being assholes and doing dirty things to get ahead today, but you may not have made those choices. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're not one of those people. And so measuring success by not being cruel to people is something that belongs on the table to celebrate. If you were proud of who you were being this year, or if you can find success stories in doing things differently this year for the sake of becoming that next best version of yourself, then my friend, it deserves to be in the winning the game of life category. Let's push out that inner critic, because your inner critic, I guarantee you, isn't helping you to see how beautiful of a person you are and how much you deserve to be celebrated. If you like what you're hearing today, if it's helpful for you, then I am so glad. And I'm going to invite you to sign up for my newsletter. because I publish lots of content to help you in times like these. All you have to do is visit the show notes and you'll find the link, or you can visit toscadimatteo.com/newsletter and sign up. I look forward to seeing you in your inbox. Now, even if you compare this analysis of how you were measuring success, reverse engineering it or not, my guess is if you compared this to what you think your inner critic is measuring you on, it's going to sound completely ridiculous. For example, in my business, I had a great financial start to the year. I was very excited about what was possible for my revenue growth year over year this year, but it plummeted. There was very little growth in the back half of the year. Now, my inner critic wants to blame me for this. My success inner critic wants to tell me I didn't do the right things. I didn't do enough things. I didn't work hard enough. I didn't, you name it. But also, this inner critic had some measures of success that were pretty damn ridiculous, especially considering the macroeconomic factors going on. The inner critic doesn't take into account these things because it just thinks everything is status quo and all that good stuff. And so we have to take an eye and say, well, if my inner critic is telling me I should have done better, did my inner critic actually take into account that almost every industry was disrupted this year? That the massive amounts of uncertainty wreaked havoc on every aspect of decision making, from leaders at the top of organizations all the way down to frontline employees who didn't know how they were going to put food on the table? Of course. But my inner critic isn't feeding me this information to temper my thoughts. So the net of all of this is that you have to look at fact versus fiction when it comes to your inner critic and what it has to say about your success. And these exercises, these deeper questions will help you in settling some of the very high emotions that come with these negative narratives. And, PS, public service announcement, please don't make any decisions about your life when your emotions are out of whack. Don't make any decisions about what you're going to do differently next year and what you're going to, no. When you are feeling bad about yourself because your inner critic is making you feel that way, now is not the time to figure shit out. Now is the time to come back to neutral. So I have some other tips for you to shift this negative loop. And some of it is part and parcel to inner critic work period, but I want to remind you of that right now. And the first thing is don't allow yourself to go down the rabbit hole. As soon as you hear your thoughts telling you that you failed, that you're not enough, you weren't successful, then you have to disrupt these thoughts. Don't let yourself keep going. Now, if it's hard for you to keep these thoughts out of your head, if it's hard for you to disrupt, I want you to reach out for support to get a circuit breaker. Don't be alone with these thoughts running wild. Call a friend and say, I need a circuit breaker. My inner critic is telling me that I'm a complete failure. The reason why I want you to do this is because you can direct them. Look, friend, I need you to be my cheerleader. Allow your cheerleaders in your life to lift you up and remind you of all the fucking amazing things you did this year. Because I guarantee you, anybody that you call that's on your side, that's on your team, is going to tell you without hesitation, without question, the things that they are so proud of you for. Allow them to help you get out of the dirt with your thoughts. I also want you to consider the season that you've been in this year or these past 6 months or what have you as another way to shift this negative loop in your head. To really sit back. Again, this is that 50,000 foot view thing and say, what season have I been in? Was it a season of grief? Was it a season of personal growth and focus on self? Was it a season of giving yourself permission to just be and stop engaging in the hustle culture? Maybe it was a season of building your confidence and going slower and being more assured in your decisions. Maybe it was a season of independence and not relying on other people to tell you what to do, but to honor your own intuition and trust yourself about what those next right moves were. Maybe you were in a season of holding boundaries and giving more time to yourself to honor what you needed. Maybe it was even a time of prioritizing your health above all else and investing time and energy into that. When you can really step back and ask yourself, what was the season I was in? Man, this is a great step to giving airtime to the truth. The next tip I have for you around shifting this inner critic loop is to celebrate what you did accomplish and what you're proud of. And I want you to write it out and write it out and write it out. I want you to write out what you learned, what you grew through, what you did accomplish, the wins, the big wins, the small wins. Grab a calendar if you need. Look at your day to day. Remind yourself what you accomplished. And I even encourage you to do this with a friend. Do this with a work bestie. Do this with anybody that is close to you and knows what your plight has been this year. You have got to spend more time on the positive things in your life than in the things that didn't go the way you wanted. Your inner critic wants you to spend a lot of time on the stuff that brings you down. You have to combat that with giving more space to the joy in your life and more space to the celebratory things. That's how you drown out the negative voices. I also want you to be kind to yourself this year, especially in the end of the year. Again, when you're in that review period, take care of yourself. Maybe you need some self care days so that you don't go down that rabbit hole with the inner critic. Go to the movies, binge on your favorite show. And yes, distraction is a fair choice. Man, when I'm having a really down day, my husband comes home and I'm like, are we going to watch a show? Because I've spent a lot of time in a dark place and I just want to be completely somewhere else. So whether that's reading, watching a show, a movie, whatever, that's a great move to make to disrupt your thoughts and take care of your needs. There's something that Will Guidara, the author of Unreasonable Hospitality, said on the Oprah podcast recently, and that was to have an amazing bottle of wine on your worst days, to not save those bottles for when you're having a great day. And I thought this was great counterculture advice. Like, why not take yourself out to dinner on a shit day? Why not go get yourself something that you've been wanting on a shit day? So reverse the script, my friends. Another easy thing that you can do is to turn up and turn on the music that makes you feel good. Like literally change the vibrations in your room and in your body. I have playlists for this. When I am just feeling down, I have this playlist to bring me back up and to remind me who I am, to remind me how powerful I am, to remind me of my light. And now this is like a tool in my toolbox. And it's almost like my body has this natural reaction to that. It's like automatic, like, oh, yeah, I get to be kind to myself and have self compassion. Now, if you're beating yourself up over external feedback that your inner critic has glommed on, I want you to remember that you get to decide what feedback to internalize and what to dismiss. You get to be compassionate with yourself on where your growing edges are, and you get to dismiss input from others that you know does not speak to truth. This time of year, we're often getting year-end reviews, and we can go to dark places and not take a step back and look at the perspective and really honor what do we need to throw away and what do we need to look at. Because I think what we're more likely to do is take everything in and then take everything personally and then say everything that I was told was accurate and right and true. And y'all know that's not the truth. This world has not gotten good enough at giving feedback. I already know. You've probably got some messages that rock you to your core because you know they're not true and you can't believe that that's the feedback that you got. So if you need to process some of that to get you out of the hole, do that. And I also want you to remember as a way to combat this inner narrative that's not serving you, that most of life is not in our control. You know, we have to honor there are things that we can do and can control, and there are things that we cannot. A lot of markers of success do require things outside of us happening. And so we get to give ourselves a break and say, you know what? Hey, I did the best that I could. And the cards just didn't lay down the way I wanted them to this year. Again, coming back to that self compassion. I want you to trust that you are right on time and right on track. And I don't say this lightly or flippantly because I personally, I have to come back to this reminder time and time again that I am right where I am supposed to be and you are right where you're supposed to be. There's no other way for it to be. You know, it's like acceptance of what is. And of course, there's also this need to feel our feelings, you know, like if the inner critic is making us feel bad, yeah, we get to cry it out. We get to be disappointed. We get to be frustrated. I'm not saying for you to just bypass the feelings that come with these inner critic narratives. No, feel it. I had to do that myself. Like, yeah, I was disappointed in my business results this year. Yeah, it does make me frustrated that there's not more downloads on my podcast. You know, I give my heart and soul. I invest money and time into it. And I wish more people were listening. And so I get to grieve that. I get to be frustrated. But I'm not going to sit in that because I'm going to also celebrate and honor what I have done with regards to my podcast goals. I have to come back to the real measures of success for myself in this example. My measures of success are about consistency and about showing up regardless of who's listening or how many are listening, because I know I'm building a library of content that is accessible, that will be living in perpetuity in the digital world, and that it will help more people than I can ever imagine because I'll never know. And so my measure of success is, did I do the best I could? Lastly, I hope you spend so much more time with your wins. I hope that you give this so much more space in your reflecting that you don't even have enough time to think about what didn't go the way you wanted. I hope you remember that the true measure of success is about your resilience, your willingness to keep going every day, even when the wind got knocked out of you. The win is in your resolve and in your self-belief. The win is remaining hopeful during your darkest days when everything you see in the media has you questioning what is going on. The win is in trusting in better tomorrows and not letting your inner critic sabotage you, keep you small, or prevent you from taking risks in the pursuit of your own happiness. A true measure of success is how open your heart has been this year, how open you have been to receiving, how willing you have been to give and help others. These are the things that really freaking matter. Vanity metrics, financial metrics, all that stuff. When you really, really think about it, what really matters? Your inner critic isn't telling you about that stuff. You have to tell you about that stuff. You have to remind yourself. You have to be your own best friend and your own biggest advocate and be the cheerleader that is louder and more persistent than your inner critic. All right. Well, this is going to be the last new episode of the podcast for this year. I'm taking the last couple weeks off. I hope that you enjoy yourself. I hope that you're kind to yourself. I hope you celebrate yourself and your wins. And I hope you help others celebrate their wins too, because you are not alone in struggling with your inner critic. Trust. You can ask anybody that you know, hey, are you beating yourself up over the past year? You know, really do it. Let me know what you find out. So I look forward to seeing you in the new year, being with you in the Unlock Lab. This train is just getting started. I'm at just over 2 years in keeping this going. And my hope and my goal for next year is that you might even see my face with the podcast and not just hear my voice. ... To be continued. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for staying with this. Thank you for loving yourself, for honoring yourself, and being committed to showing up in the best possible way that you can for yourself and for others. That is how we truly drive change in this world. All right. Love you so much. Happy 2025. Have an amazing beginning to 2026. And I will see you in the lab next year. Ciao for now.